So, not too long ago, I did a review on a demake about the original FNAF game that I highly recommend you guys to go out and watch. After this video, of course. But recently, I've been craving to play more of these strange ports that adapts modern titles to older hardware. Most of the time, these projects are made by fans and not by big AAA companies because who else will be porting Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PS1? Like, come on now. Anyways, on a more serious note, the people who actually work on these remakes are creative individuals who are very talented and passionate in their own respective communities. They often demonstrate what is possible to achieve on older hardware, and without them, we would have been stuck in a world of what ifs. Last time, we covered a popular indie horror game from the early 2010s. So, what's another popular indie horror game from the same time period that will be interesting to see in a remake? Boy, geez whiz, I wonder who could that be? If you haven't read the title already, you know who I'm referring to. If you were old enough to experience the internet from the early to mid 2010s, then you'll definitely remember creepypasta. For those who don't know, creepypastas are short internet horror stories that are told and shared across the web. Notable figures include the likes of Jeff the Killer, Sonic EXE, the Russian Sleep Experiment, and countless more that I don't feel like mentioning. Just by mentioning these names, these characters probably traumatized and affected many childhoods. I know I have, but I think I ended up alright. I see you typing in the comments. I do have this one distinct memory where I came back from school and I logged onto YouTube to go watch some Minecraft videos because those were the hits back then. And instead of watching Dan TDM like I usually do, I went to go watch Red Mist because that was like the newest hot thing that was going around back then. And let me tell you, I myself. Some of you guys don't know what I'm talking about, but for those who don't know, if I show this specific image, it will probably trigger some flashbacks for those in the audience. It used to be referred by a different name, but I can't say the old name no more because I'll probably get age restricted or demonetized. Thanks, Logan Paul. But anyways, there's this one character that has been more impactful and recognizable than Jeff the Killer. And his name is...
And his name is John C.
It's Slenderman, if it wasn't obvious enough. Ah yes, Slenderman. You know him, I know him. He's a staple of online horror. He's been around since like the late 2000s. He's almost practically an adult at this point. But anyways, this tall, lengthy mannequin originally appeared in the Something Awful forums during a photoshopping contest back in 2009. Ever since then, Slenderman has appeared in countless media like YouTube videos, TV shows, memes, and even video games, which will be our main focus of this video. Most of Slenderman's popularity can be attributed to the games because they're the ones who helped push him into the mainstream and receive notoriety. Slender's first appearance in a video game was back in 2009 for Java called Slender's Invasion. It's a simple top-down shooter with the zombies of the game being reskinned to be Slenderman. Another early Slenderman game that most people tend to forget about is Slenderman, the game. Yeah, no wonder people forget about this game because it has the most generic title known to man. This game was released on October 31st, 2011. It's a short psychological horror game that takes inspiration from the online analog horror web series called Marble Hornet and their interpretation of Slenderman. The game is enjoyable and it deserved its own separate video, but it wasn't as impactful to the character when you compare it to its younger counterpart that many of you are more familiar with. The game I am referring to is Slender, the 8 Pages. Slender the 8 Pages is a popular indie horror game that took over the internet during the early to mid 2010s, with countless YouTubers hopping on the trend and giving their quote-unquote real reaction.
Whoa! What the hell is that?
The premise of the game is pretty simple and straightforward for anybody to understand. So basically, you play as a random dude that's wandering into the forest and just collecting 8 pages. If you collect all 8 pages, you can survive the tall, lengthy white dude. So with that being said, What will happen if we translate the experience of the game and shove it into a Game Boy? And what will happen? Luckily for us, there's already a port of the game for the Game Boy called Slender, the 8 GBC pages. This demake was developed by JWG the artist, and it was released on November 13th, 2019. It reimagines the iconic survival horror title from a 3D game to a 2D. This dramatic shift in gameplay was done out of necessity in order to conserve processing power. To understand the limitations of this ancient brick from the 90s, we first need to examine the specs of the hardware we're dealing with. The original Game Boy Color has a custom 8-bit CPU, a 32KB of system RAM, and a resolution size of 160 by 144 pixels. So, converting a 3D title like Slender to the original Game Boy Color can be seen as a nightmare, especially if you're trying to recreate it one-to-one. Now, I'm not trying to say that 3D games are impossible to achieve on the Game Boy Color, because that is simply not true. One of the more impressive titles to ever come out from the Game Boy Color is 2001 Toy Story Racer. And yes, I'm being serious, just hear me out, you guys. From an outsider perspective, the game looks like dog shit, but when you take account of the constraints of the hardware, the game becomes more of an innovation rather than a limitation. But how were they able to pull off this impressive feat, especially from an 8-bit processor? To answer that question, it didn't. Let me explain. You see, you're actually not playing in a fully 3D render world, because the background of the screen is actually a pre-render animation. So the track that you're playing on screen is not fully 3D with polygons and shit like that. No, it's just an illusion to trick your brain into thinking that you're playing in a 3D environment. So 3D is possible on the Game Boy Color, but just remember there's a big asterisk on the end of 3D. But anyways, back to Slender, the 8 GBC pages. So, how's the game? Well, if I'm going to be completely honest in this review, the game feels half-baked. My main issue is mostly on the game's sound design, and I found myself being annoyed with the game's soundtrack because it's just the same loud buzz, repeated every 2 seconds. The lack of a melody made me hit the mute button because the soundtrack doesn't enhance the playing experience. Another problem I had with the game is the total runtime. Now, to be fair, the original game was more of the same, so I cannot criticize it for that reason alone. I was really hoping for the developer to add a narrative to the game because it's something that the original Slender game lacks in. If the game had an original story, it would have separated itself from the original source material and it would have made it all the more memorable. Slender the 8 GBC pages is just your bare bones standard port with zero added new content. But anyways, that's about wraps it up for this review. I was your host, Ita2755, and I'll catch you guys next time. See you later. Bye.
Super idol the shower, don't mind me, the tie by you, Semo, they don't mind me,